I always thought it's bonsais as houseplants.
That's a really common misconception. Originally, bonsai were grown in Japan and China, and trees were collected in the mountains and brought down to the city for the landscape.
Now, I always thought that bonsai were little plants, but you have a plant here that's 3 or 4 feet tall. How old is this plant?
It's remarkable, 75 years old and taken care of for all those years.
And grown in this container?
Remarkable, isn't it? Just lots of water.
And how old is this little one?
40 years old.
In this container?
Just amazing how it was sculpted to look like a wild tree in nature.
That's incredible. Now, I know a little bit about trees, and there must be at least 20 different species of trees here you have as bonsai.
At least you can actually grow bonsai out of any type of tree. In fact, I have lots of trees that can be grown in the house. Would you like to get out of the rain? Take a look.
Absolutely, yeah, let's take a look. You weren't kidding when you said you had a lot of different species of bonsai. Look at this place.
Yeah, it's beautiful. There's a lot to look at. You know, before World War II, Americans didn't know very much about Japanese culture or bonsai.
Now, these look like they do great outside, but it gets really cold here. We have to bring them inside for the winter?
We bring them in September, and they actually need lots of light and water to take care of them, but they're not that hard to grow.
Well, they look like these would be a little more work than your average houseplant.
Well, that's what makes it such a great hobby. You need to learn how to wire, prune, and maintain this tree. It's very therapeutic. Have you ever grown one?
I haven't.
Well, let me show you. We have a workshop out here. So bonsai is the art of pruning and sculpting trees. Have you ever seen a tree like this?
I plant these all the time. This is a Japanese white pine. How do you turn this into a bonsai?
Like I told you earlier, bonsai is a hobby and an art, and so it's up to the individual artist to create a beautiful tree. And so in the pruning process, I'm going to teach you how to create a beautiful tree out of this. And the first step is actually finding the front and then finding the height. The Japanese have given us the rules, and now we just need to learn how to apply them. A trunk to height ratio is the first step in getting the right proportions in growing a bonsai.
So what do you want that to be?
Well, you actually want it to be, believe it or not, about 6 times the height of the trunk, but you don't need to be that technical. So these are the tools I use, Roger, for creating my bonsai. This is a concave cutter, a bonsai shear, a pair of wire cutters, and a root rake.
They're a lot like the tools I use in landscaping, only on a much smaller scale.
And they're highly specialized, but you can get by, quite frankly, with just a good pair of shears. I'm going to use my concave cutter to snip it right here. Take the top right off this tree. What do you think of that?
That's a pretty drastic cut.
Well, you know, in your world, you're trying to grow trees to become big landscape trees, but in bonsai, we're trying to make a more miniature version of the outdoor natural form.
So what's our next step?
Well, the next step is finding the branches. So there's a first branch that we need to find, and that's usually the lowest and most powerful dominant branch at the bottom of the tree. Next, I pluck the needles off to prepare the tree for wiring and thinning the branches out. I start at the top and I work my way down to the bottom. Branch selection is very important. I've pruned out some of the smaller branches to simplify the overall effect of the tree. So now we've finished pruning the tree, and the next step is bending the branches. And for that, I use this special wire. And it comes in all different gauges, all different sizes for different weight branches. But I always start with the heaviest wire first, and I start at the bottom of the tree, and I just plant the wire in to anchor it. And then in very neat coils, I wrap the the around the trunk of the tree, and this is what's going to ensure, solid grip and will allow me to bend the tree into shape, right up to the top. I use the lighter gauge wires to bend the smaller branches from the bottom. We actually will anchor that, and that's why I've cleaned the needles so that it doesn't damage it. And you start with one half, and then you come around to this other half here and work right on out to the tips, being very careful not to crush any of those buds. All right, the tree's been wired.
Well, in my world, the sign of a healthy tree is when the branches come out and grow up nice and tall.
I realize that, and in bonsai it's the complete opposite because we're trying to make the look of an ancient tree in nature. And think about a tree on top of a mountain that's been windswept and beaten up by snow and just forced into these somewhat contorted but also very beautiful angles. So you see how by bringing the branches down, I'm actually mimicking and creating the look of an ancient tree.
And the wire just holds them right in place?
It does, and the wire stays on for about a year, and then you cut the wire off before it cuts in. But yes, it's almost like braces on your teeth in that the wire holds the branch in place. All right, it's time to repot this plant.
You're telling me you're going to get that plant in that big pot in this shallow container?
And I'm going to do it without damaging the roots and keeping the tree healthy, and it's going to be beautiful. It's an important part of the whole bonsai process.
I got to see that.
Roger, this always looks a little bit more aggressive than it actually is, but I rake the roots out starting at the bottom. And you see how I'm turning as I go. And if you notice, I haven't really cut any roots yet. I've just been knocking the soil out of there. So all the roots are very healthy, and it's a much more passive technique than it actually looks like. The surface roots I have to be a little more careful about. I'm raking them out. It's actually a beautiful set of fibrous roots. We want to spread these roots out so that they're all spread flat, but again, not cut and damaged, so that you have very, very healthy root mass. And now the tree is ready to be potted. So next I prepare the pot, and I put the screens in the hole, and really that's no different than a house plant where you put a clay shard in the bottom of the drainage holes to keep the soil from falling out. But in bonsai, everything is done with, minimizing space because it's such a shallow container. And this is wire that's going to hold the screen in place. And this is a very important process of keeping the tree secure in the pot. So the wire is going to anchor the tree into the pot because the soil we use is very granular and the tree will have a tendency to vibrate out. So we have bonsai soil here, which is a very free draining coarse mix, and we've formulated it particularly coarse for this pine. Put it in the pot, about just an inch along the bottom just to get started. And then the positioning of the tree in the pot is usually about 1/3 off to the side, and with the apex greeting you, almost as if it's bowing forward. The branch off to the side, and then we use the wire to actually anchor the tree in the pot. So it's been prepared so that I can tighten up on it, give a nice twist to anchor it in. The other side gets tightened up the same way. And before you do the finishing touch, you really want to make sure that you have the front of the tree well positioned, well balanced, because it's going to be in here for at least another 3 years. And so the wire gets cut, and the final step is making sure that the new soil gets planted firmly in there. So you're planting the tree as you go, and it's a good time to start thinking about landscaping as well by maybe taking a rock, and I plant it in the soil so it looks like it's been part of the landscape for centuries. But as I'm working, I'm still planting the soil very carefully. To make sure there aren't any air pockets in the soil, I like to take the tree and dunk it in a basin of water. You see all those bubbles coming out?
Yeah.
Yeah, it only takes 20 seconds, but it's an opportunity to get all those little root hairs completely saturated. But after the first time, I just water it with a regular hose and a soft nozzle, just so the water penetrates right through the soil.
Are we done now?
Well, we can call it done, but I think putting moss on the tree is a great way to finish. Roger, why don't you put a piece on there?
Oh, thank you. I get the honors, huh?
Yeah, look at that. Look how beautiful that moss, and it gets, actually, don't be afraid, don't be timid, press down, plant it, make believe it's a piece of sod.
Nice.
Yeah, everything in bonsai is done in miniature, but it's also done for the neatness of the effect. See, you really don't want it to float off. You want it to be planted just like a garden. Hey, that looks great. I can put you to work here.